Good evening, welcome back to Marty's Tying Bench. Tonight we're tying a Stubby Chubby. This is the small entry in the Chubby Chernobyl line of flies. These are tied in, well, I'm tying this one on a size 10, but it's a short shanked wet fly hook. You can tie them in 12s and 14s. You just adjust the thickness of your, or the width of your foam. Any black thread will do. I'm going to start off with some antron yarn right off the card, but I'm going to only use half the volume, and this is going to serve as kind of a hotspot slash butt section. And if you get some material on the hook, it'll make it easier to tie the foam down tightly and have it not spin. So I'm going to tie this the full length of the shank and then come back forward with the thread. Cut that off just a little bit farther back than the bend of the hook. Now we're going to dub. You can substitute and use any kind of colors you want on this thing. We're going to go with a purple scheme. And the dubbing I've got is Senyo's Fusion dubbing, Electric Grape or some fancy name. But I like it because it's got a little bit of flash woven through it in blues and reds, and I think there was even a green in there. Anyway, just get some dubbing on the hook shank. Not the easiest material to dub, but I don't mind this thing being shaggy underneath. Make sure you get a fair amount of dubbing right there at the back, because that's going to help secure your foam without it spinning. Now the width of the foam can vary. This is pretty forgiving. The skinnier you tie it, the easier this fly is going to be to tie. The skinnier you cut it, the easier it will be to tie. The bigger you cut it, the wider you cut it, the more flotation you'll get out of it. So you'll end up settling on something in between, but just know when you trim your foam the first time, it's pretty forgiving. Couple of turns, got it snug, and then some security wraps right in front. We're going to install some legs in the back. And what I've got is Montana Fly Barred Sexy Floss. Find something that's small. You get a little more motion out of the thing in the water. Leg length is up to you. I'm going to tie one leg in on one set of legs in on my side, and cut those so that they're identical. And then I'll reach across and tie a couple in on the far side. And I'm going to measure it against the ones on my side real quick, which will help me get these things as close to identical as I can. Well, minimize the trimming at the end. Whatever you do, don't stretch this span flex when you cut it, or you'll see these little strands come out and the thing will start to get curly and kinky. Now I'm going to go back to the dubbing, and I'm going to get enough dubbing to go from where I'm at back to the front of the hook. It's still not very much. Get it on there fairly tight, and I'm going to start by going in between the legs, and that will cover up the thread wraps, and lift everything out of the way and come forward. This is where I want my thread, but I got a little more dubbing, so I'll just go to the front and then come back just a little bit, maybe an eye width. Lay the foam down, couple of modest wraps, and then tighten up, and then some security wraps so those don't come undone. Now I'm going to tie the wing and the cider in before I tie the front legs in. The wing is widow's web. You can use poly yarn, you can use McFly just about anything. I can trim some of these stray ones off. And this is longer than my wing will be, so I'm kind of measuring it so that it's 2 lengths of the body. And then I'm going to tie it in, make sure it's centered, fold the front back, but before I stretch it, I'm going to jump up there with the thread, kind of catch one little nurple there. That will help keep these wings swept back. Now for cider, I've got some parapost. This is for tying parachutes. It's a poly yarn. It's treated for flotation, but I like this one because it's Cheeto color. How can you not like it? Now I'm going to trim that off fairly square because I'm not going to double this one over. I'm going to leave just a little bit sticking out. Doubling this material is too much, and dividing it into half volume so you can double it over is too much trouble. So I'm just going to use the full width of it and not double over. Now the foam's going to come back, but I don't want to stretch it all the way back. I want a loop in it. It'll give me a little head on the front and just a little more foam. Once I've got it tied in and the thread is snug, I'm going to lift that and get some security wraps underneath so none of those wraps will loosen. Let's trim this black end before we move on. Now you can cut it flush, but I like to just reach in and cut it to a little point. Our wing is going to be a little bit past the back of the hook. Can always cut this shorter if I think it's too much, but so I usually start long. Now we're ready for the front legs. Just gonna kind of eyeball it so that they're about the same length as the rear legs. Not much waste if you can eyeball it when you learn to get these legs just about the right length at the start. Far side. Trim this one the same length. Now, just those wraps to tie in that head and then to tie in the legs is going to leave a bunch of thread wraps underneath. So we're going to cover those up with just a tiny bit of dubbing. You probably get more lint out of your belly button than you need for this. There we go, in between the legs again. And lift that up and get it right under the eye. That's where my whip finish is going to be. Then we're all done. You can go in there, and if you get any widow's web that's too long or sticking out to the sides, you can trim it up a little bit, but once you put floating on it, it'll slick down, and once the fish starts chewing on it, it'll get messy again, and you'll find that messy works even better. So there you go, a little purple chubby or stubby chubby. Have fun.